Well, hello and welcome to today's session of Sarah Says. The topic today is fearless living. I just want to continue to express my gratitude to those of you who watch these videos and who send me your feedback and who share it with your friends. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video. That's how YouTube knows to share it with other people. And if you have ideas for topics, please do not hesitate to let me know. So with all of that, let's get started. So today's topic is how to retake your personal power in the area of fearless living. And so I want to address a few things before we get started. The first of which is, while I am a master life coach and with certain niche certifications in emotional intelligence and some other areas. I've been a coach and consultant for nearly 15 years. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a licensed medical doctor, therapist, counselor, psychologist, or psychiatrist. And if you are under the care of any of those people, please follow their directions, follow their guidelines, take the meds that they give you. I am only sharing with you my thoughts and my opinions, and that's all it's good for. Please do not start, stop, change, or alter any kind of treatment, medications, any therapy that you may be taking without discussing it with your professional who cares for you. With all that being said, I want to jump right into the topic. And the important thing that I want you to remember is, I think it's important that we talk about what fearless living is and what it is not, what fear is, what it is not. But the biggest thing to remember is when I talk about fearless living, the angle that I'm coming at it from is that life is short and that we live our lives in many ways bounded by what we've been raised to think other people will think. What we've been raised to think is how we should behave. And in many ways that constrains us religiously, socially, economically, professionally, and overcoming those fears, the voices that we've heard since childhood, is a difficult task. It's not insurmountable, but I think that you have to come to the point where you begin living your second life when you realize you only get one life. And so the first thing I want to talk about, of course, is what is it that you're afraid of? I'm filming this in the middle of a global pandemic, batshit crazy politics, and a lot of civil unrest. Coupling that with people's personal struggles with mental health, a lot of religious upheaval. There's a lot going on right now. And so I'm not talking about, are you afraid of spiders? I'm not even talking about, are you afraid of heights? I'm not talking about, some of those, what I call peripheral fears, unless it is debilitating you in some ways. I'm not crazy about spiders. It's like I say, I'm not afraid of not afraid of water. I'm afraid of drowning, right? I'm not afraid of heights. I'm afraid of falling. And so I think that we have to get a grip on some of those fears, and unless it's a phobia and debilitates your life, that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are the larger questions of, what are you really afraid of? Are you afraid of losing your stuff? Are you afraid of not being loved? Are you afraid of being ridiculed? Are you afraid of growing old and dying without having made a mark in the world? What is it that you're really afraid of? Because I think all too often we live in our lizard brain. We're like amoebas in a petri dish, and we're simply responding to the pokes and prods of the environment around us. And I think until you take a moment to thoughtfully assess what it is you're really afraid of, it is nothing more than you living in your lizard brain. So I want you to just take a minute to think about, are you afraid of speaking in public? Start with that. That's an easy one and extremely common. Well, let's be real. It isn't that you're afraid of speaking in public. You're afraid of what happens next. You're afraid of the unknown. What if you forget? Well, so what if you forget? That's not really what you're afraid of. What you're afraid of is what happens next. You forget, people laugh at you. You forget what you're going to say, people make fun of you. And so I think we have to keep asking questions, and they're sometimes extremely uncomfortable. You may be afraid of leaving a spouse and getting a divorce and living on your own, but that's not really what you're afraid of. You're afraid of what happens next. You know, will anyone else love me? What about the money? What about the kids? What about what if, what if? So it's the unknown, it's the unpredictable, it's the things that you can't control. And so sometimes comfortable misery is the choice that we make, rather than being engaged in, you know, something else. Hey, Lori, sorry, I hadn't clicked over to the section where I could see who's on today. So just hello and welcome to those of you who are on. So I think taking a minute and assessing what it is you're afraid of. If you want to rot down, you know, spiders, snakes, heights, water, that's fine. But I want you to go deeper than that. When it comes to living your best life, your most full life, the happy life, if you're feeling down and sad and depressed, what is it where are you? Until we take that uncomfortable journey down the lane of what am I thinking and what am I feeling, I could talk all day, but you're not going to be able to solve it, because you don't even know what it is. You don't know what demons you're fighting. So when I talk about retaking your power, I'm talking about both acknowledging and overcoming your fears. I'm not saying that you should never be afraid again. I still feel anxious about many things, but until you acknowledge what it is that you're afraid of, until you recognize and give it a name, you are unable, I think, in my opinion, you're unable to address it. You're unable to overcome it, go through it, go around it, deal with it, because you don't even know what it is you're afraid of. You don't even know what it is that you're fighting. And so I think we every day have to conquer our fears. And I do not want to diminish anyone who is struggling right now with fear of, again, the batshit crazy world we live in. You know, a pandemic, all the economic issues, all the civil unrest, all of it, all of it. And so, but until you name it, you can't overcome it. You can't deal with it. So let's talk about fear. I want to start right there. So I think one of the important things is to recognize that what you feel is real. Our physical reaction to fear is the same. Your body doesn't know the difference between an attack from a saber-toothed tiger or an attack on your ego. It doesn't differentiate whether it's a physical fear of someone hurting you, or an animal hurting you, or falling down and breaking a leg, or do I have enough money to cover all the debts that are going to hit my checking account this month? I mean, the fear is real, and your physical reaction is the same. You still feel this certain way. There's a very interesting thing. If you take your fingers and you touch them to the back of your head, just like that. Now, don't do it. But if you were to push your fingers in about 2 inches, you would touch 2 little glands in your brain, and it's essentially your lizard brain. This is the area of your brain that functions the fight, flight, freeze, or faint response. And so it's called your amygdala. And it doesn't know the difference between real and imaginary fears, and it doesn't wait to get all the information. This has kept human beings alive for tens of thousands of years. You know, it's what causes us to react quickly. It's what causes us to jerk our hand off the fire, or if something's coming at us, to duck. It is an instinctive reaction. The less we have to worry about our physical and the more we're worrying about our mental and emotional and social, we still are reacting to those things as if they're physical threats. And now, with the batshit craziness we live in, we also have physical threats again. And so it can be overwhelming. It can be overloaded. We can feel overwhelmed. Some important things to know about this. When your amygdala kicks in, it can run for it's pumping just hundreds of hormones and chemicals into your body for the fight, flight, freeze, or faint response. It can run from 18 minutes to 90 minutes. You know, your heart's beating, you feel a knot in your stomach, you get flushed. Those are your body's reactions to the amygdala response. And so when you feel anxious and stressed, remember cortisol gets kicked out there too. So if the stress is not real, you may want to eat. That's why we eat when we're stressed, because we're thinking there's a danger and I don't know when I'm going to get to eat again. Again, it's your lizard brain. But it doesn't wait for all the facts. And so if we don't know what's happening, we can react to that by thinking the fear is real, the anxiety is real, the threat is real. And what the threat is not real, the fear is real. The anxiety is real. But we think that what may be hurting us is real, and sometimes it is not. It's a perception. So anyway, understanding the physical response to fear can help you address and overcome your mental response, and also can help you make better choices, because fear can become a habit that you feel anxious, and so you give credence to it, and because I feel this way, it must be real. And so these are some important things to know. So where do our fears come from? What causes us to be fearful? What causes us, what causes us to be, anxious and afraid? Well, it is a ugly, ugly circle. And the circle starts from our childhood. The voices in our head are parents talking to us, grandparents talking to us, mean girls, mean boys, the bullies in school that said things to us. Nice girl training. I mention this because women are taught to be pleasing, to be cooperative, to be helpful. And so we're afraid, well, nobody wants to be a bitch. And so I've got to be helpful, and I've got to put up with this. And so we're afraid from all these things. And then we have the internal dialogue, even though parents, grandparents, Aunt Frida is dead, you're still replaying in your head that internal dialogue that you've heard. And so the fears of what other people think, or what may happen if you do or don't do something, it is a vicious cycle. And again, if you are living mindlessly, you're not paying attention to what's happening. And so you feel a certain way. The feeling is real. The feeling of fear may be real, but what you're afraid of is not a rational fear. What you're afraid of is the unknown. And so this vicious cycle can feed fears and create some kind of a just ongoing, just rolling fear that just really does overtake you. And so I think you actually have to analyze. That's why it's so important to know, what is it that you're afraid of? Are you afraid of what others think? Why are you afraid of what others think? Well, because my mom or dad or Aunt, Susie said, well, you sure don't want people to think you're stupid. Or are you afraid of being criticized? Well, one thing I realized, particularly with women, we're afraid of being criticized because when we walk in a room, we're afraid of what other people are going to think of us. But where does that come from? Well, it comes from our own behavior, because when people come in the room, we immediately assess and criticize and critique them. And so we assume everybody's doing the same thing we are. And again, these are assumptions. So you're afraid of the unknown. And it is such a waste of energy, Donna. Excellent point. And so the other thing is, are you afraid of being rejected? Well, who's going to reject you? The people who love you or strangers? I mean, take a minute, and I want you to think about, just take the last 6 or 8 months, and can you even name the people that you have seen and criticized? Do you even know them? Will you ever see them again? Or moments that you felt like somebody might be criticizing you that you didn't know? I mean, we're worried about what complete and utter strangers think, and not worried about what we think about ourselves. I mean, think about the insanity of that. And so our fears come from these old habits, these old ways of thinking, this ingrained concept of who we ought to be, what we ought to be, whether it's your church, whether it's your school, whether it's your family. There's this framework of what ought to be. And anything outside of that is something that we're afraid of, that we're anxious about. I also want to suggest to you that whether you realize it or not, one of the things that you may be afraid of is feeling something that you don't know what to do with. There have been many times, particularly this year, where I have felt anxious and afraid and upset and nervous and unhappy, even borderline depressed, where if I know where it came from, and I didn't like it, and I don't want to feel that way, and so I'm almost like trying to avoid it. And so I want you to be thinking about, are you afraid of doing or being or trying something because you're anxious about how you are going to feel? And it isn't the feeling that you're afraid of, it's you don't know what to do with it. And so go back and watch the show about emotional intelligence, because as you build your emotional intelligence, I guarantee you, the more fearless you're going to be, because you're going to know how to deal with the anxiety that may come from being worried about what other people think, or the upset that may come by being rejected for saying something that you honestly believe or doing something that is authentic to you. The other thing I want you to think about is, when it comes to these fears, is how many of them are rational? As Donna commented, we have this unconscious indoctrination. Excellent phrasing. How we were raised, and a perfect example. And my husband's he painted a lot when he was younger, but his dad told him painting is for pussies. And so there was this indoctrination that, I really love to paint, but men don't do that. And so he doesn't do a lot of that. And I think that's something that would bring him joy, but his dad's voice is so strong in his head. So who's in your head? That's what I want you to think about. Who's in your head telling you what to do, and you're listening to it? And so I want you to move forward. And so the way to move forward is to engage in activities that empower you. This is about retaking your personal power. And so I think the first thing that I want you to do is to list your fears. And again, I'm not talking about, unless it's debilitating your life, I'm not talking about, afraid of spiders or snakes or bugs or, heights or water. I want you to go deeper than that. I want you to think about, are you afraid of what people will think? Are you afraid of failing? Are you afraid of being rejected? Are you afraid of being criticized? And keep asking yourself questions. When you list these fears, I want you to keep asking yourself, where does that come from? Whose voice is that in my head? Who told me that I should be afraid of that? What happened? Did you have a negative experience one time or 10 times that has, given you burned you? And so, well, I'm never going to try that again because somebody made fun of me for that. So list them, name them, know your enemy. Because if you don't, you will be forever the amoeba in a petri dish, just responding like a mindless, lizard brain, just responding to external stimuli. The other thing is, I want you to begin to think about, what impact do these fears have on your life? What is it you want to do that you're not doing because you're afraid? Are you afraid? Is it a reasonable fear? Is it something that is controlling you that is no longer a reasonable control over you? You're not a kid anymore, right? And so what impact do these fears that you have, what impact does that have on your life? It's interesting. I was coaching somebody the other day, and we had finished an angel card reading, and she really wanted to quit her job and start this business. And it's a fascinating business. And her husband said, we can afford it. You can quit your job and start this business and give it a year and see what happens. But she was so anxious about what other people would think, and so anxious about what perception, people would have of her in this business. And it's a fascinating business. I'm excited for her, but it had such control over her that even though all the opportunities existed, all the dominoes fell in such a way that she could do it, it had a huge impact. And she did overcome her fears, and she's going to give it a try. But how many things have you missed doing because you were afraid of it? You were afraid of what other people were going to think, or you were afraid of what other people were going to say, or you were afraid of, whatever. I mean, perfect example is I do have a certain amount of anxiety about water. I almost drowned when I was a child, and so I feel extremely anxious when I go snorkeling, but I love to snorkel. And so last year I had the incredible pleasure. The universe gave me a gift of just making it possible for me to go to Africa for almost a month. And I was on a photo safari with some amazing people. And we went to Madagascar and we were snorkeling. And there was a moment where I almost just succumbed to the habit and said, I just can't. But, again, is the regret going to be greater than the fear? I would forever, how often am I going to get to go to Madagascar in my life, right? And so I had to get in the water. I had to snorkel. I had to try it. And it was amazing. But the impact that fear almost had, I had to overcome that and just do it. And so I want you to think about, sometimes you don't get a second chance. And is the regret you're going to feel greater than the anxiety or fear that you feel right now? I don't think I've regretted one failure. I have not regretted one failure. I have learned something from everything I have tried and failed at. And, you don't want to fail at snorkeling, of course, because that's not a happy outcome. But, in business, speaking in public, every single time I've tried anything, if I failed, I learned something. So I want you to just think about, what impact are your fears having on your life? So the next thing is, I want you to change your thinking. Many times, and particularly when we're just surrounded by fearful things, we're making choices based on what we're afraid of happening versus what we hope will happen. Now, I'll tell you how I see this play out. When I suggest that we could have a wonderful world, and I suggest that this wonderful thing could happen, the amount of commentary, well, that'll never happen because, we make too many decisions based on what we're afraid of happening, or the habit of fear, or the habit of thinking that things can change, that we're making choices based on those fears. And so what I want you to do is make changes to your thinking and make those choices based on what your hopes are. Now, that doesn't mean that you aren't cautious. That doesn't mean that you don't prepare for disaster. That doesn't mean that you don't have a backup plan. But what I'm saying is, you're making choices based on what you're afraid of happening versus what you hope will happen. And so what if you begin to change your thinking and make just incremental changes to the choices you make, and those choices are now based on what you hope will happen? Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the excuses that we make for not living the life that we've imagined, because we keep making excuses, which we will later regret. So I want you to think about every time you wanted to try something and the excuse that you made, and then how you felt later because you didn't do what you wanted to do. You wanted to write a book. You wanted to start a gym class. You wanted to change your hair. Fill in the blank, right? So I want you to start analyzing some of the excuses that you've made and think about how you felt later. I would rather feel regret for having tried something than feel regret for having missed an opportunity. The other thing is here's your homework, and this is where I want you to go from here. Beginning today, this very day, I want you to have 20 seconds of insane courage every day. And here's what that looks like. You will set a boundary. You will make a phone call. You will start writing the book. You will start investigating you'll call and say, hey, I'd love to lead the next Zoom call. You will do something, just one thing, 20 seconds of insane courage every day. I guarantee it will begin to take you in the direction of your dreams, whatever those are. Some people never want to speak in public. That is not their thing. They don't want to climb a mountain. The fearless living for some people means something entirely different than it does for others. For you, fearless living may just be you set boundaries that you're not going to accept people talking to you a certain way. It may be that you're going to choose to live your life a certain way, no matter what people think. But I'm telling you, you only get one chance to do this. And I don't know about you, I don't want to live my life based on a map or a guide that was written for somebody else or by somebody else. And so 20 seconds, just look at 20 seconds. That's a lot of time for you to do something, say something, make a phone call, choose to not answer a text, choose to get off Facebook, choose to make your own video, get online, start a video and tell people what you really think. Whatever it is, 20 seconds of insane courage. So again, I can't thank y'all enough for your support of these videos, for your ideas of what what life can be like, and what topics I can discuss. If anybody has any questions, I know there's a few of you on right now. Seems like most people watch it later. But you're welcome to shoot me a message if you have questions, problem solving, brainstorming, that kind of thing. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. Please share this with anyone that you think. Make sure you like it. That also helps with the algorithms to have it be shown to other people. And until we get together again, my friends, you have been zinked.